I had an idea for a show, but first I needed a table, a backdrop, and a host with a microphone. That's me. I'm Thomas J. Beleza, and this is Let Me Be Round With You, a show where discussions are explored through civil conversation. So I found 4 people I like and decided to see where today's topic goes in hopes we can inspire positive dialogue. Welcome to another episode of Let Me Be Around With You, me and my radio voice. I don't know why this has a video, it's so weird. This brings us to today's episode, which is focused on money talks, or rather the lack of conversation we have about money in general. I'm Thomas J. Beleza, and I'll be your moderator today for this lovely exchange. And as always, I'm being joined by my 4 favorite people in this world. We have Brian Radke, Christina Boborowski, Chris Bauer, and of course, the fabulous Gabby Faye. I'm going to throw it to Brian. Why don't you tell us a little about who you are?
Well, my name is Brian Radke. I am an actor. I'm an acting coach, and I'm getting really good at quarantining.
Excellent. We really appreciate the quarantine beard. Speaking of beards, Christina, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, being that I am your beard, Tom, I am an actress, singer, artist, and a U.S. Navy sailor, and that is enough for me right there.
Oh, yeah, she definitely sails around the ocean blue of the city of New York. Chris Bauer, why don't you tell us a little bit about your hair? No, give us a little something. Who are you?
Yeah, I'm Chris Bauer. I'm a tech worker in New York City. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for the invite, and happy to talk about this very engaging topic.
Wonderful. And a little hello to your cats in the back, my friend. And of course, the one and only, my fabulous friend, the Gabby of the Fae. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm an actor and producer based just outside of New York. I am very bubbly, very passionate about many issues. I will talk to anyone. My parents named me appropriately because of my love to gab. So I'm super thrilled to be on this show, talking and listening.
The Gabster, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. So let's get started in the show. You know, as always, we have to create a position in the show, and then we discuss that, we break it down, we bring it around the table, and they answer their questions. Of course, I'm in control, so they have to get called on by me. Let's see who has what to say about what the topic is today. You've probably heard the saying, you should never discuss religion, money, or politics with people. The act of advising people in our lives, even in an anecdotal effort, could leave a foul taste in our experience. You should, invest, save, spend, and this is how you do it. That kind of power really it takes these conversations and leads them to a massive debate. I have heard, and often with others when I'm speaking with them, they have this stance between ultimately the higher paying jobs or better money management. Today's episode's position focuses on our willingness to speak about money with one another for the purpose of educating our communities to take back control over their finances instead of their money controlling you. So today's first subject, if the argument for higher wages is a valid stance against the idea that money management will lead to a growing solution, what is the reasoning that 70% of people end up broke within a few years after winning the lotto? Additionally, the pushback that we need higher livable wages is the solution because a moot point if you consider even that the fact that 60% of NBA athletes go broke within 5 years of retiring. Brian, we're going to throw it to you first. What is it about these two positions of higher wages versus money management that leads to a we're right, you're wrong when the evidence shows more money, more problems is accurate if one lacks money management skills, therefore canceling their ability to afford a person's lifestyle to hold on to that money?
Wow, that's a lot. Well, I think basically, first things first, I would love to know what the Mo problems are with Mo money. I'm just going to throw that out there right away. Secondly, I think, the biggest thing about this to me is sort of like the whole idea of these conversations around money kind of stem from how your family approaches it. Like, what is the value? Is money for you status? Is money for you a tool? Is money for you any of those things? I think in generally, I think a lot of families, I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for at least my own, is that, money wasn't something that we really talked about. So going up, as the following generations came up, it was just sort of like this sort of mysterious thing of like, don't ever ask your dad how much he makes, and don't ever talk to your uncles about how much they make, and all of this crazy stuff. So you never really got, at least from a family sense, at least speaking for myself, of, okay, well, what is this, and what do you do with it, and how do you make it work for you? That was something that, in my family, we just didn't talk about. And if I have no idea of how to accumulate or how to save or how to invest money, it makes it perfect sense to me that if I had a lot of money and it disappeared quickly, well, it's simply because I just didn't have the tools that I needed to make it work for me.
That's accurate. If you don't have the tools or the skills to even organize money, it doesn't matter how much you're making. And that's the problem with money managers versus of the idea of higher wages. More money, more problems. The answer to your question is that's the result. You have more money, you have more responsibilities, you have more opportunities to blow away the money. There's even a suggestion within the article that I'm about to read for the subject too, that also discussed that usually one of the major things for lotto people is they start giving money away to friends and family, but that they can't shut that off. They don't have the management control to shut that off. They just keep giving money. And, some people, even celebrities are told, sometimes you got to say no, you just got to put it down. No. But that was a great answer. And you're right, which also kind of brings us to the idea that this episode is about talking. It's about having that conversation to relate to the idea that if we don't talk about money, how are we going to fix our problems? How are we going to learn how to take control back? Which brings us to the next subject, a study in the 2015 The Pew Charitable Trust's report on the complex story of American debt showed that 80% of Americans are caught up in the chains of debt. Mortgages are the most common debt, followed by unpaid credit card balances, car loans, and student loans. People live in the right now mentality of I need, when really it's I want. Wealth is formed by changing bad spending habits. Wealth, or wealthy people, earn the expense by creating assets to afford the right to pay or buy something. I need school when you're in 12th grade waiting to graduate before saving up any money for this venture turns into school loans. Planning ahead is factually smart when it comes to financial organizing or management. Same with car loans or credit cards. A credit card is not to give you more money. It's designed to help you secure your money. As a debt card, as we know, could lead to you having money stolen, whereas a credit card company will void out stolen expenses. Owning people takes away the footing beneath your legs. So, Christina, as the subject of debt can be stressful for some, when it comes to seeing how deep their hole is, what is it about the access of available money that is so enticing that a person would spend money well over what they can afford to pay back?
Well, that's a good question, Tom. I personally have been there before, being an artist for many, like I guess 15 plus years. I was 18 when I decided to venture into entertainment, and I try to be independent every step of the way, and it's very difficult. I went to college, I took out loans, all of it. I like to move. I moved to LA, with whatever money I had, and the debt kept coming. But there's a point in my life when it was like, wow, like this is overwhelming. I need to stop. I remember even being in high school and thinking, oh my God, like look, I see the debt ahead of me. It was crazy. I knew it was coming. It was my biggest fear, actually. And I always was upset about how they didn't teach us this in, elementary school or middle school. We didn't talk about it at all, and in my family, it was just get a job. It wasn't save up as you're working. It was you just always have to have a job, right? So as long as the bills are paid, that was the thought in my house. And I didn't know how to do that. I eventually figured it out, and it took a very long time. And I'm finally at this ripe age figuring it all out, but I wasn't prepared. You have to really learn the hard way if the education system doesn't provide that for us. And it's very sad that they don't do that for us. If you have good parents, you're very lucky that they did that for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, this episode, we are going to bring that up, the idea of generational wealth, which is going to come into the next subject, is that does it start in the home? And, these are habits that we have to create. Saving money or spending money is a habit. The way we save, the way we spend can change the way we look at money. Sometimes we look at money as it controls us. We need money to pay our bills. That's the mentality. But other times people say, well, I need money to make money. And then they spend money to make money, which is also bad thinking, right? So the idea to manage money in general takes somebody willing to listen to somebody of a higher education, because sometimes we don't know the reality, even though we have it engraved in us, that habit, that this is what I was taught, or as Brian was saying, the lack of what I was taught, where we're not allowed to talk about it. So I guess I'm doing it the right way anyway. I won't tell people I'm bad at money. So I'll just keep living with bad at money, and hopefully I'll figure out like Christina did. And, that's not necessarily conducive to a healthy, strong, adulthood. But moving on to subject 3. Chris Rock said in a joke, and I am paraphrasing, Shaq is rich. The person paying him is wealthy. Generational wealth is hidden in the educated tunnels of a century's divide from the poor, middle class, and the rich. Wealth is taught as a form of organizing income to protect, invest, and reward, whereas the mindset of the poor is a learned skill to trade hours for cash. I want to define wealth today as wealth is the amount of time you can go without having to recoup income. The definition supports the idea that wealthy people earn time by letting money work 24/7 for them, versus poor, middle-class mentality families spending their time to earn that money. Generational wealth developed through passing down not just money, but the education to maintain that money, to change the brain from recouping by trading life hours and getting money to work for you. Now, Chris, I don't have enough money to invest, quote unquote, is a way of avoiding the truth. A guy is suggesting it's not about money management, but the need of having more money. How can people get a grip on their finances if they are not taught to live below a lifestyle of wants versus needs, to instead focus on building good spending saving habits? My question to you, Chris, is the lack of money management education to our younger generations the cause of people working harder for less?
I think that's actually a really interesting and great question, because it occurs to me almost immediately that when you go through the schooling system, when you're being taught things, or at least where I grew up, you don't really get that kind of education. You don't really get taught like how does the market work? How does investing work? What do you do to really build wealth when you have a surplus of income that allows you to make the smart decisions that are associated with generating significant amounts of wealth? People who, and I think that everybody has probably had an experience where they know somebody or we're friends with somebody who has generational wealth, and they have kind of a baseline that's a lot higher than what you might have yourself. And it can be kind of frustrating, I think, to see that sort of thing happen, because you're wondering, what is it exactly that I don't know? And you don't have the resources necessarily to go out and find those things. A really interesting quote, and I'm probably butchering this, is when it comes to generational wealth as well, is that the first generation makes it, the second generation spends it, and the third generation blows it. I think it's something along those lines. It's just indicative of what that sort of mentality kind of gets you. Like you have family or generational wealth, and if there isn't somebody there that's making sure that everybody in that hierarchy or in that family gets that education, that it's more likely than not that it's going to be lost within a couple of generations. And it's kind of like an interesting thing to see, is that it's not even that that knowledge needs to be shared necessarily, but more so that it speaks to a core human concept of having difficulty managing this sort of underlying resource process that people struggle with and have difficulty kind of getting a handle on. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I got it. Hey, look, trust me, I'm good at knowing when you're done. But I think you bring up some really amazing points, and and it seems like we keep going back to the same thing. Ultimately, we're not being educated as youths. We're not being educated in school. We're not being educated at our houses. And you're right on that quote, by the way. You're obviously paraphrasing, but it's true. The first generation makes it, the second one basically spends it, and the third one is broke, right? Except for when they start educating you on the process of how. The idea that I'm leaving all this money to you will ultimately be fruitless or frivolous if I don't teach you what to do with it. If I don't teach you the value of the money, and that's also another thing. We as a society, ultimately, in general terms, the majority of us place too much weight on what money is without actually understanding how it works. And it usually ends up taking control of us. For example, I have to work 3 jobs just to save up this money to pay for my house and my car and my blah, blah, blah. And now things are controlling us, and we're not necessarily controlling them. And that's, again, we're talking about debt incurring. We're just like, well, I need a house. So then you buy a house. Well, did you have the money to buy it? Well, I have a job. It's not necessarily taking responsibility into organizing what you should be doing with your finances. And this is why it's difficult to talk about it, because sometimes it's hard as a person. I'll get right back to you, Chris. As a person, to hear someone say, hey, you should do this with your money. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you saying? I'm an idiot? I should know what I'm doing with my money. And it usually causes people to be uncomfortable talking about the money. Mr. Bauer, go ahead. What were you going to add?
Oh yeah, just as another interesting point, and I was looking up that quote to see how badly I'd done it. But additionally, I read, according to Time, it takes the average recipient of an inheritance 19 days until they buy a new car. I think it's a really interesting figure. Okay, so you get an inheritance, and then the average time before you buy a new car, which, who knows if that's something that's even really necessary, is only 19 days.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, again, that's the I want, but in their mind, they're like, well, I need a new car. The funny thing that as I was growing up, some of my mentors, well, actually, I should say, every mentor that was a millionaire that gave me some tutelage had the ugliest, crappiest, useless car you could think of. And I'd be like, what are you doing with a crappy car? You have this money, you might as well have a nice car. They go, look, I need a car to go from here to there. If I need a nice car, I rent a town car. I have a driver. Now I could drink, I could party, I could do whatever I want. I don't have to think about driving. They're going to take me to and bring me back. There's one less thing I have to deal with. And it's worth spending that little extra money for the car service when I need it once in a blue moon and to look nice than it is to have a car to go to the grocery store that costs me $700 to $1,000 a month. And that blew my mind. And from that point on, people will be very accurate with saying, I have crappy cars in my life. They always, a car would last a year or 2 years, and then I would trade it in or just buy another $1,500 car, because that's the thing, Chris, you're right. We have these wants and desires for certain things, but we're not thinking practically. And, all right, Brian, go ahead, add to that.
I just have a funny little story here. I grew up in Detroit from a long line of auto workers, and my grandfather, who worked at Dodge, he worked at Dodge. He walked to work every single day. He worked at Dodge for about 35 years. He never had a driver's license, and the only time he purchased a car was for his kids.
Wow. Well, he dodged that bullet. All right. All right. No, but you're right. In that term, in his mind, he's like, why do I can walk? It's fine. I'm walking. I don't need to. Well, of course, I'm not him. We don't live him, but he still was making the responsible decision of why am I going to spend money on this when I know I don't need it? It's like in Brooklyn, people are like, why don't you own a car? Because I don't need to park it. I don't need an hour of my day to park at night and an hour of my day to park in the day, or I just want to go to the thing and come home. And, Brooklyn, if you have a car, great, but it's not needed, All right, subject number 4, we're going to jump to Gabby with this. I got to read a little backstory on the position, and then we'll ask her question. A recent survey from financial and market research firms in 2020 titled Top Findings from the 2018 Fidelity Investments Couples and Money Study found 34% of cohabitating couples, married or not, one or both partners couldn't correctly identify how much money the other makes. It also suggested that more than half of married couples carry debt into their marriage or relationship in the beginning. Many Americans have trouble talking about money, but not all of them, not in all situations, and not for the same reasons. In this sense, the money taboo, quote unquote, is not one taboo, but several. Oddly enough, money taboos are absent or much weaker in many countries and cultures outside of the US. But when the conditions present in those societies exist in certain pockets of America, silence can give way to relative openness. Americans, in other words, are hesitant to talk about money, except for all the times when they're not. Gabby, what is it about our country that has trained our behavior to abandon the topic of money within our own households, where the foundation of generational wealth would most benefit?
I think that, well, let me maybe first tell you a funny story, which maybe contradicts your point. But a man that I briefly dated on maybe like our second or third date, he asked me how much debt I have, which was hilarious. He was a lawyer, so I guess he planned to be doing fine in life and, you know, take care of all his expenses. I think that in America, there are a lot of issues surrounding the topic of money. And I mean, even in the jobs that I've held, you know, my employers have said to me, do not talk to anyone about what you make. And that obviously is because not everybody's making the same amount, right? So I also recently watched this really actually very inspirational talk that Lily Bedletter was giving. So she worked at, I think it was Goodyear. It was a tire place. And she was making 40% less than the male employees who were doing the same job as her for years and years and years. And she never knew because she actually would have been fired from her job if it was found out that she was talking, or that anyone would have been fired if they found out that they were discussing payment. So one, when you have, you know, like if that is your only source of income, or, you know, a big source of your income is your day job, right? And you're threatened with something like that, why would you jeopardize that, right? Especially if you have kids or you have bills, right? Which all adults do. So it's almost like discouraged. And then I think there's also the thought that many people have that certain types of people should maybe be making more money. Like, for example, if you're in a relationship where let's say the woman is making more than the man, that could potentially like emasculate a man. And if there are kids in the house, they might not want the kids to know that, just as an example. So I think there's a lot of things that play into it that keep people from talking about, you know, their salaries.
Yeah, you know, you bring up some good points. We actually have an episode in this season about wage gaps with females versus male and things like that. However, to the argument of, and this is the devil's advocate ultimately, the argument of speaking about how much money you make in a workplace, established all the way back in 1935, the NLRA made it illegal for an employer to fire an employee just for talking about wages at work. In 2014, President Obama signed an executive order, non-retaliation for disclosure of compensation information, that helped further cement the NLR's power and importance. So it's just, again, this comes down to being educated as individuals in our community, knowing what our rights are when it comes to finances and how money works and how we're allowed to have a conversation and communicate our concerns and worries. So when it comes to even a job per se, you know, you do have rights. However, some jobs think it's a little under the table to be like, hey, I make this much, how do you make? And it just comes down to ethics. However, it is not illegal, but it is illegal to be fired for bringing up that kind of money. But great points, Gabby. I really appreciate that. Moving on to the final subject of our episode. Oh, wait, Gabby has something to say. Here we go. Go.
I was just going to say that at the time that she was working, it was illegal. But she actually, she went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they did establish some laws. I don't know if it was exactly what you just were talking about, but I mean, I'm happy that those laws have been placed that they're now in order, because losing your job over that, it's like, if we don't have the conversations, how do we know if we're being compensated fairly, besides for, like having minimum wage? Like, what else can you do to figure out, like, am I making the right amount for my experience and for how long I've been here, and any other factors that might go into that.
Yeah, the aspect of discrimination for race, creed, or gender. Thanks for looking that information up. And again, we're basing everything off of what we know, and obviously laws come into place because of the injustice that some people explore or experience. Moving on to the final subject, which is ultimately going to be given to the table. I'll call on each individual one at a time, and we can answer the question. The position of this episode is hopeful. We can help open the doors to explore any given topic. It happens today's topic about money and our lack of ability to educate through debate the value of destigmatizing how money can be controlled, managed, and organized to take away the power of money and the delusioned ideal that more money will solve problems. So my question is very simple for today's table. Starting with Brian Radke. If you were given $100,000 tax-free, what would you do with that money?
I try not to waste all of my time thinking about things that will never happen. But I think, ideally, the easy things come to the forefront of your mind first. Is like, I'm just going to pay off my debts, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. I mean, right now, I think, maybe I would, try to put together a really nice, tight little film and try and market that, and, start another splash in another pond,
Hey, look, there's no wrong answers. You do what you want to do with the money. And Brian, as Brian said, he wants to ultimately take the money and film a small project to make money on it. Not bad. How about you, Christina Boborowski? What would you do? $100,000 tax-free.
Well, I'd buy 4 cars, and you get a car, you get a car, and you get a car. I would I was thinking about that today driving home from my job. I was like, should I donate half of it? I'm like that person. I give it all away. But I save half, and then save, because I want a house. I don't own a house. So for me, that's a good goal. Yeah, I'm simple life, maybe a cabin in the woods, maybe save some of that money for wood and food and and some Wi-Fi if I can get it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. As long as I can afford wood, I'm happy. A forest. I want to just buy a forest. That's great. You have dreams and aspirations. We're gonna throw it to Chris Bauer. Is that right? Yeah, Bauer. Mr. Bauer, let's hear what would you do with $100,000?
Well, $100,000. Well, I will say that I basically focus all of my effort towards staying out of debt at all times. So I currently don't have any debt. If I had it, that would be the first place, because there's no other place in the world you can go to get an immediate return on investment on liquid cash. If you had a 4% loan out there, do you want to make 4% on every dollar you spend? Put it on the loan. After that, I do, pretty seriously invest. I do my own, kind of due diligence on stocks and different opportunities. So if I were suddenly to come across a significant amount of money like that, I would probably start a very, very serious research time period to figure out what the best use of that money is and what I thought was going to get me a good return. And I would probably immediately invest it. Sorry for being boring.
You're not being boring at all. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear what you would do. Your answer was so good. It made me glow. Look at this. Look, I'm glowing like the sun is blaring on me. All right. Again, there's no wrong or right answer. You know, hey, Gabby, Miss Faye, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you would do if you got $100,000?
Well, there's so many tempting things to do, but what I would actually do is whenever I make any money, any amount, I have a division set up of like what percentages of every single thing in my life I need to put money into. So like a savings account, a rent account, debt account, living expenses, all my grocery trips, you know. And so I would take a chunk of that money and I would divide it between all of those categories. And then I would take a larger chunk and go to a financial advisor, because as much as I would like to believe I'm great at investing, I have not done enough research where I would feel comfortable to just put a large sum into the stock market or other possible investments. So I would employ someone to help me out with that. But, you know, I do believe that in order to, like we've been talking about, grow your wealth, pay off your debt, and have wealth, not just, you know, like strike it rich, but to have something that can sustain you for the rest of your life, you have to have more than one stream of income, and investments are certainly a big piece of that.
Excellent. That's right. You know, you got to at least invest in something, right? Now, normally I don't give my 2 cents into any topic, but I like to throw in something at the last moment where we're talking about the fifth subject. What would I do if I got $100,000? You know, 19 days later, I would definitely purchase a car. And but specifically 19 days, not on the 18th day, not on the 20th day, and obviously on the 36th day, I'd buy my mother a car. All right, so what would I do with $100,000? I'm just kidding. I wouldn't buy my mom a car. With $100,000, I would first organize and understand my overhead, so I know what my average monthly overhead is, and then dictate that based on an 18-month foundation, so I can live on the security of what it would cost me as a minimum to survive for 18 months. After that point, I will know what my threshold is, which ultimately means I would have more than that, because there's no way that my average $36,000 a year livable is more than $100,000. So then I would take that money and I would organize it into 4 important categories: a security, a growth, dream, and emergency fund. That's right. Security will be there to protect me if I ever go broke. Growth will be all the money I have to invest. And of course, the dream is my reward, whatever I want. The car, I can afford it now. And the emergency fund is if something bad goes wrong. Now your money is working for you because it's organized and it's being utilized in a way that is in your control and not controlling you. Those are some things I like to say about financial security. Anyway, I have to throw it to the end of the episode. You know, thanks for coming on to enlighten our audience through several different perspectives on our given topic today. I am beyond grateful to know you all in one way or another that allows me to have bright minds come on today's episode in a civil discussion. I'd like to say thank you to Brian Radke, Christina Baborowski, Chris Bauer, and of course the wonderful, beautiful Gabby Faye. Let me be around with you. I really love hearing people I respect open their thoughts to enlighten my life. That's it for this episode of Let Me Be Around with You. See you next time. And remember, listen to hear one another, speak to add value, and grow together from the beauty of other perspectives. Thank you.